You've shared kind of these kind of principles that you've taken from your own background, being a kind of a quote unquote commoner, as you mentioned. And I think while that's very interesting to hear, I think we'll see more and more leaders like yourself who may not have engineering background but are able to build these kind of solutions without a huge engineering team or even without engineers necessarily. How did those kind of principles that formed as a leader translate into the principles of Carro when it came to its own Gen AI journey?
So maybe to give you a very quick 3 points. So when I first started off the journey, that was back in 2023. No, sorry, yeah, back in 2023. Yes, early 2023. Back then, I think that was when ChatGPT first came out. But we were seeing a lot of projects coming up, right? There was a LangChain. For those who are go with us, LangChain, it is a project whereby you can chain multiple prompts together to make it into a workflow. There were also talks about AGI, Super AGI, Baby AGI, AutoGPT. Quite a number of tools came out. So it was very clear to me at that point of time is that if Carro is to invest in Gen AI, we shouldn't be building everything ourselves, right? In fact, we should only build things that's Carro specific, because even if I were to build a tool myself today, this exact same tool will be available 1 week later, and it will be even faster than myself shipping it. So instead of trying to do everything ourselves, we want to leverage the community also to do this. At the same time, build what is Carro specific. To give you some example, when we first started on LangChain, we needed to build a lot of different capabilities together, including things like how do you run calculation on LangChain? How do you do text to speech or speech to text? And also image recognition, because we are dealing with multi-format, multi-model types of conversations within Carro. Is that something the best use of our time? I think that is a no. So hence, instead of building all of that, we shifted in terms of building endpoints such as Carro search endpoints that goes into our ERP, right? Why is that the case? Because at the end of the day, if I want to get a task done, or let's say if I'm a salesman, I want to know that this customer probably can only afford a car, maybe $1,000-$2,000 of installment per month. What kind of cars that Carro have in inventory today that will suit the needs of the customer, right? So we basically build our own tools that serve functions like that. So I could query this, and then the salesman will get 5 or 6 different inventory available and then recommend it to the customer. The second point is that we prioritize building agent windows over big general chatbots. So this is not to say that we didn't build those big general chatbots before, right? We had some company sponsoring us to do it. So you okay, since you want to do it for us, why don't you do it? But our realization is at the end of the day, it's nothing more than a glorified FAQ. So the general chatbot, the big general chatbot, the best function you can do is just to repeat whatever information you have in your documents, right? In your policies, in your SOP docs and things like that. But there's a lot of nuances that you will not understand, and all this will be lost in between. Instead of trying to use that and confuse my workforce, we focus on agent window. Easier to deploy, faster for us to fine tune it and make it more accurate. So some of these examples, just now the example I mentioned, the application automated, that was actually built on our own Zi backend. So we have a simple backend whereby I can create agents. I'll write my prompt into the agents, and then all the user need to do is to upload a document and click a button, and then it returns a JSON result right from the document. We have done that for numerous of different things. We have done that for the application forms I mentioned just now. We also done that for even our stand-up meetings. So imagine you have stand-up meetings with our sales team twice a day, morning and evening, right? So how do I govern the team to make sure that all the various customer leads are being taken care of? We have built a meeting summarizer in which they just need to drop the meeting recording into the folder, and automatically we return the key points. Of course, we have to sanitize what are the key points, like how we format the key, and that will automatically be generated on a daily basis. On the conversation of accuracy, what's your alternative? Your alternative is sent to maybe okay, 10 branches, 10 times 2, 20 recordings a day, 30 minutes per recording. That's probably one full-time person's job. Instead of doing that, now everything is done using RAG, right? Using Gen AI, and I can build workflows subsequent to that. So that's the second part, right? Prioritizing on building agent windows. And the third and last thing is per what I mentioned to you just now. Focus on small and quick wins instead of overly ambitious project. In Carro, I have to tell you, our time works very differently. Our time works very differently. We always wanted everything yesterday. So much so that waiting 1 month always felt like an eternity, right? So instead of trying to scope the project so big and it takes weeks to months to develop, we focus on quick wins and making sure that with these quick wins, each of these quick wins, we can answer to our boss, myself, to Aaron, why I get my engineers to spend 2 hours to solve this problem that we have in this department, because we can count for how much time savings, how much cost efficiency or productivity that we can save. With the rise of agentic workflow, to get to agentic workflow, we need to make sure all these small processes are there, because eventually you need to chain them all up so that one agentic workflow can cover for the whole process end to end. So it is part of the journey anyway. So that's how we went ahead and developed our strategy towards Gen AI.
No, I love that you contextualize the principles within the last three years that you've been exploring Gen AI, from LangChain and targeting specific workflows that could immediately show you like real world and results, to you talked about multimodal models popping up the year after or several months after, and you're now able to like take in more types of input and process that. And now in 2025, what's exciting for you guys in terms of the Gen AI journey? Yeah, you hinted at it a little bit. Maybe you can share a little bit more.
There's a few things that we're working on. I think one thing is agentic workflow, which I mentioned just now. So it is about how do you carry the whole workflow from end to end, right? How do I automate the whole entire process? Let's say, for example, I have a customer who wants to buy a car. Today, to carry this customer all the way from buying, starting the transaction, all the way to payments, to transfer, in between there will probably be 4 or 5 different teams that will be involved, right? Someone processing the transaction document, someone who will be handling the loan application and chasing the banks for disbursement, someone will be responsible for the transferring of the car, someone will be responsible for the logistics. Of course, on the physical world side of things, I cannot do that with AI, right? At least not yet. But do I really need so many people in the process to handle documents? So the thing is about how do we think about and reinvent how the workflow would be in the future, so that the salesman basically has a virtual assistant in front of him to handle all this process for him. Imagine you are the salesman directly in front of the customer, instead of telling the customer, oh, give me a while, let me check with this other colleague in terms of where your loan application is and things like that. On the dashboard, you would be able to immediately see what's the progress, in which stage we are at, and all these are all handled programmatically, right? Because I have an AI agent that's managing all this. This is not to say that we are eliminating jobs. It is just that the nature of the jobs will change, in the sense that the person in the past who is handling document, instead of doing all the manual typing themselves, the manual submission themselves, they will probably be the governor of the process.
You still need the domain expert to guide that.
Correct. You still need domain expert. The domain expert is there to govern the process, making sure that the AI is not making any mistake, making sure that it is going through smoothly. There's no, obviously, the most common issue is typo, right? No typo. So the people is still there, but instead of all this process being manual, the operator becomes a governor of sort to do that process. So that's one thing that we're looking at very deeply this year, so that we can better streamline our whole processes as well as our workforce. That's the first part. The second thing we are looking at is really to get into self-sufficiency when it comes to AI. For Carro, actually, we have a wealth of data points throughout the years that we have been operating. As mentioned at the very beginning, we always have AI tools in Carro, right? We have AI actions, we have AI pricing, etc. So we actually also reside on labeled data that we have accumulated over the years. What is very interesting, especially also with with DeepSeek's paper, white paper in January. We're also experimenting to see how can we take this data that we have and train them into smaller models in which we could deploy, especially offline, to our agents on the ground to get things done. Whether is it on the inspection front or whether it's in the customer service front, we are doing some experiments in this front to develop highly specific domain and use case specific models to solve the problems that we have. So that's something that's coming out in Carro in 2025.
Yeah, no, I think, it's quite interesting that from experimenting and looking at what kind of technologies would work for Carro, it's shifted to how then can you build the right technologies for Carro's like specific functions and trying to build your own small models. I think one thing that our audience would definitely be interested in is after all of these experiments and all these kind of efforts that you try to do to implement Gen AI and see how it can be valuable for your organization, at the end of the day, it's all about ROI and how you communicate that to stakeholders, and especially for those who are like middle management, how do you communicate that to your higher ups? So how did you approach it? How did you think about ROI and communicate it to the organization?
So I think there are two parts, right? One is to the business stakeholders, the management, the board, what Gen AI actually brings to them. And two is what's the value of Gen AI that brings to our working level people. ROI on both sides. So probably to first address the management viewpoint of view, I think after rolling out Gen AI, there's a few other solutions that we have that I didn't mention earlier, such as our ticket QA bot. We actually audit all our communications in Carro, our agents' communication with the customer, to make sure that they do not say the wrong thing or perform the wrong action with the customer. The ROI that we get at the end of the day from a business standpoint is much better conversion rates. Much better conversion rate because we can identify problems early. We can take preemptive actions to train our agents that's making all the mistakes. We can do service recovery in a sense if there is a problem that our agent has generated for a customer, we can do quick service recovery for the agent. At the end of the day, with the same spend that we have in marketing to acquire customers, I'm getting almost double in terms of the conversion rate. And it's all down to governance, down to people management, down to mindset shift. Do I actually need Gen AI to be 100% accurate in this case? Do I need Gen AI to have guardrails because they may say the wrong thing to the customer? I don't need that because it's internal facing. It is about changing people's behavior, changing manage the company. With that, we have seen that kind of improvement in terms of results. And of course, I mentioned just now about our time savings, the RAG workflows. We are saving easily 2,000 man hours per month, right? With just a few hours of work from an engineer's perspective. So that's pretty much how we measure the ROI from a management standpoint. And these are numbers that I can call out and say, this is what we have already done in the last one. And I think on the people front, it's our ROI. It is about how can I help them to minimize the mistake at their work. For most companies, right, when you make mistakes at work, you get penalized. Garbage in, garbage out. Going back to that point earlier, right? The input into the ERP, if the input is wrong, then naturally the rest of the process will get wrong and there could be a financial impact on the company. So as per any company, we are also very strict and disciplined in terms of data cleanliness and making sure that our team members are on the ball. With Gen AI, right, with the workflows I mentioned to you earlier, we are able to help them reduce their error rates. To be spending so much time, or rather their eye fatigue, which is true, the eye fatigue to eyeball every single thing and make sure that they do the right data entry. All these things get automated so that they can focus on the real value creation in their job. That's the ROI that we bring to the team for them so that they are able to do their work better and more effectively, which in turn help them to get whatever incentive that they get from their productivity, right? The outputs that they have.
I read the word that you used earlier, governance, like individual kind of workers having governance over kind of their workflow. And I think in a pre-AI, there's a lot of factors outside of your control that might impact your own kind of results and accuracy, even as you mentioned. But I guess with more kind of automated workflows and Gen AI, you can have, I guess, greater ownership, right, over these workflows. Yeah, on that note, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think we've run out the hour. And yeah, thanks again for coming on call with us and sharing at least, even in the hour, I think we've covered a lot, different kind of use cases that you've shared and kind of different principles also that hopefully our listeners will be able to take home and also use in their own organizations to rethink how to look at AI and Gen AI. I'll leave his LinkedIn in the description in case you guys want to follow. In the meantime, thanks again for joining us on call, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.